Hey everyone, so with more and more talk of minimum wage increases across the country, I want to talk about unfairness. Unfair, a word that is often employed by those who advocate for a large state. Okay, so if minimum wage is increased and businesses forcefully have their costs increased, it naturally follows that businesses will need to cut costs somehow and use less labor as the price of labor climbs. This is Economics 101, unless something is perfectly inelastic. If the price of that thing goes up, consumers of that thing will buy and or use less of it. Very easy to understand. Now, however, in many parts of the country, negative repercussions from minimum wage have been felt. People have had their hours cut, prices have increased for customers, special sales have been canceled, benefits for employees have been diminished or cut altogether, and those who advocate for a minimum wage have the audacity to cast the blame onto the employers, not the law itself. So this is what I mean by unfair. Statists have advocated for a law that by its very nature increased the costs of business by a substantial amount, and when businesses try and limit their costs, they are casted as greedy, corrupt organizations. This is like throwing a chessboard on the ground, declaring victory, and then accusing your opponent of being a sore loser when they take issue with what you've done. The fact of the matter is that most people who advocate for a minimum wage simply are not aware of just how difficult it is to run a successful business. They are completely naive to how strenuous it is to turn a profit. I have had this conversation with many people, and it comes as a shock to them that even big businesses do not have a sky-high profit margin. In fact, there was a public opinion poll done on this very subject, and it showed that most people felt businesses in your average industry made upwards to a 36% profit margin. That is about 500% higher than the reality. This just goes to show that the average person probably has this stereotypical image in their head of CEOs lighting cigars with $100 bills. Minimum wage advocates tend to only recognize that a company made $1 billion in profit, for example. They are hyper-focused on only that fact, but they never take into account that it costs, on average, $15 billion to turn that profit. And if you increase their costs by just 1%, that is a few $100 million eating away at the profits of that company. If you don't think that a company like that will do something to mitigate those costs, to stem the bleeding, you are kidding yourself. Very often there is a thin line from making a profit into running in the red, even when you are talking about huge multi-billion-dollar businesses. Instead of recognizing this fact, those who advocate for a minimum wage simply see suits and ties and $1 billion in profit and immediately assume these companies have pools filled with cash. To put it lightly, it's a naive perception of this issue, and it's leading people to advocate for an exceedingly harmful, quote, solution. Thanks, and that's all.